Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel for our weekly by-election roundup. We are not going to get straight into it this week. I'm going to do a bit of self-indulgent things that some of my viewers don't like. So please do feel free to use the timestamp feature to skip ahead to the by-election results if you're not interested. But I just wanted to say thank you very, very much for getting us up to 11,000 subscribers in this last week. Look, I genuinely never expected the channel to be this successful when I started it about a year ago. So thank you, everybody. It is genuinely very humbling to have so many of you following the channel and to have so many of you tuning in each week. I suppose just because we have had a sort of surge of new subscribers over the last month or so, I want to set expectations for some of the people who are new here. And if you are new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please do take the opportunity now to press the subscribe button, because we do some very unique politics coverage here. Look, guys, I'm not an expert, is the main thing to say. I don't proclaim to be an expert. I'm very much an enthusiast. I find politics enjoyable, dare I say, even exciting, and I enjoy it. So the reason I started this channel was because I couldn't find any similar content that was sort of doing what I wanted it to do. So I decided to have a crack at it myself, and the reason it's carried on is because you guys seem to enjoy it. So I enjoy it, you enjoy it, and while that's the way it is, I'll keep on making videos. So that's just to lay the expectations out there. There will be errors in my videos. There will be inaccuracies. Feel free to point them out, but just do that from a place of understanding that I'm not an expert and I'm doing this in my free time around work and looking after my daughter and stuff. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for subscribing. It genuinely means a lot. And we'll get straight into these by-election results now. One thing to mention this week, unfortunately, and I'm actually re-recording this because I had a device next to the microphone which had been putting a buzzing sound through, so I'm going to have to re-record all this. But still, having recorded it once, the Scots still haven't counted the votes yet. So unfortunately, we're going to miss out on the Dumfries and Galloway result in this video. But I have to get this done now-ish, and hopefully this recording's fine because I'm not going to have a time later. So sorry to the Scottish viewers. I will do my best to remember to come back and look at this result next week. If it's not, if they get the result out before I finish recording, I'll splice it in later, but unfortunately we are going to miss out on it if that doesn't happen. So we go to Macclesfield Central first, Cheshire East. Now it's Labour defending, Green gain. Now this is going to be a theme, and obviously we had our Northwest preview for May next year, local elections on Tuesday, and this was very much a feature of that video. The Greens being a thorn in the side of Labour, in the opposite side to what Reform are. So the Greens here with a very impressive increase of 19.7 points on their previous score, up to over 40% of the vote. Labour down 25.7. So yeah, it's kind of a standard thing to see these days. A very poor result for them, and like I say, this is going to be a theme. So a 13% majority for the Green Party on a 24% turnout is a bit more typical of what we expect to see from these sort of local by-elections. So a good result for the Greens there. Again, worrying for Labour going into those elections next year. So we're going to skip over Scotland then. Unfortunately, we'll come back to it if it gets put out before we finish. But Ashdown and Conquest in East Sussex. Now this was a ward that I previewed last week, and somebody did get in the comments, and because I somewhat blithely said, oh, it'll be a Liberal Democrat Conservative toss up because it's in East Sussex. I didn't really do due diligence and look up where Ashdown and Conquest actually was, and it is just sort of outside or on the outskirts of Hastings. So, as we can see, defending as Conservatives and Reform have won. Now, it's a very close victory, 32.2% of the vote, a low vote share to win on. Second place was the Green Party on 24.5%. They increased by 16.4%. The Greens do have quite a presence on Hastings Council, so not surprising to see them doing quite well here. And look, majority 197.7 percentage majority for Reform. So slender, but not too close. Turnout over 30% here is a bit more like what we've been seeing recently, with turnouts around the 30% mark. And look, interesting here, I suppose you could say all three actually of the main parties, if you include the Liberal Democrats, relegated to not being in the top two. Conservatives 19.9, Labour 15.9, Lib Dems not really contesting this one at 5.2. So look, interesting, isn't it? You see neither or none of the main establishment parties being in the sort of in the hunt, really. Look, good result for Reform. They'll be happy with that. It's a slender, obviously a low percentage of the vote to win on, but yeah, they'll be happy with that. So we move on now to South Bank ward, Redcar and Cleveland, where I think maybe Reform Maybe slightly disappointed. I don't know. It's a Labour defence here, Labour hold, so good news for them. Their vote share did decline by 17 or 18 points. But actually, that's pretty mild, isn't it, really, compared to what we have been seeing from them. Um, and they still managed to get 47.4 of the vote. So I suppose that previous 65% of the vote they had last time out kind of insulated them here. And having no Liberal Democrats and no Greens standing as well probably helped. Reform, with a very impressive 44.3% of the votes coming straight in at that number. So look, you can't say really they can be too disappointed. I think, obviously, bear in mind, a few weeks ago, they set their record vote share in Redcar and Cleveland, and that was actually broken last week anyway in East Lindsey. But they got a very, very high percentage of the vote in Redcar and Cleveland just a few weeks ago, 65-ish% of the vote. I think they got that time out. So I expected them to win here, in all fairness. And look, to put it in context, I read Andrew Teal's preview for this ward in particular, and he was saying that Labour really threw a lot at this. Their candidate is well known. She is a former leader of Redcar and Cleveland Council, so they really wanted to win this, and they only just held on. It was a mighty close, 24 votes in it, 3% margin of victory for the Labour Party. So it was very, very close, and Labour threw a lot at it. So I think that probably tells you sort of where the dice are falling in this part of the world. 20% turnout, again, more like what we expect to see from local council by-elections. Unfortunately, quite a low turnout there. So look, Labour will be very happy to hold on to this one. Reform very, very close, but not quite able to supplant Labour up there in Redcar this week. Quinton then, ward, Stratford-on-Avon. Liberal Democrats defending. Liberal Democrats hold. I did say this last week. Not too much to say, really. The Liberal Democrats increased by 3.5 points on their previous score. Reform come in at 33.1% of the vote to supplant the Tories again. Once again, Tories down to third place, not in the race at all. Down 26 points as well. Really, really bad for them, actually. That's a bad result. In fact, I forgot to mention, we're going to quickly scroll up because I remember to mention this in the first recording. I've forgotten here. In East Sussex, in Ashdown and Conquest, down 40 points, the Tories. 40 points. I mean, that is really, really bad for the Conservatives. And actually, a spoiler alert, but I think that this night really has probably been a worse night for the Conservatives than it was for Labour, although the Tories did have a bit of good news later on. But back to Quinton. Yeah, Tories down 26%. Yeah, comfortable enough margin of victory for the Lib Dems there, 14 points. 30% turnout, again, a bit more around that sort of average we've been seeing lately, with turnouts getting up towards 30%. Not too much to say. I expected this for the Liberal Democrats to hold, and they have. What I didn't expect was for Reform to win Salford Priors and Alcester Rural. So defending with the Conservative Party. Reform have gained. Now, look, again, somewhat blithely, I suppose, but Stratford-on-Avon is Liberal Democrat territory. They're very good in that part of Warwickshire, the western side of Warwickshire, and you can see it was mighty close. Reform win 33.3% of the vote ahead of the Lib Dems on 32.9% of the vote. That's a majority of 3 votes, apparently. 3 votes in it, 0.4% margin of victory. Again, turnout decent at 33%. Not bad at all for a local by-election. Look, really, really close here for between the Liberal Democrats and Reform. The Tories again down almost 30 points. That's what I mean. It was a bad night for the Conservatives, with the exception of the next result. And interesting, to see this battle between Reform and the Liberal Democrats. We sort of expect Reform to beat Conservatives in various parts of the country. We expect Reform to beat Labour in various parts of the country, and vice versa with the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives and Labour. But actually, we don't have too many examples of a tete-a-tete between the Liberal Democrats and Reform. They tend to be, one of them is quite far out ahead of the other, and they've taken votes off of Labour and or the Tories. One or the other have, and the two of them aren't that close. In Surrey, we've seen Reform supplant the Tories as the second place sort of party, but they don't tend to be that close. So it's quite interesting seeing this. We had one in Baber recently as well, where Reform beat the Liberal Democrats as well. So interesting, if Reform can start beating the Liberal Democrats more consistently, that will be very, very positive for their prospects in terms of a general election, if they can actually challenge the Liberal Democrats in certain parts of the country. Now, just to put my hands up and say, I was a bit, like I say, a bit blithe to just assume that the Lib Dems would do well in this part of Warwickshire. You can see in Alcester division, so this is the electoral division for Warwickshire County Council, which is not the same as the ward we just looked at. The ward would be much, much smaller. You can see the Liberal Democrats here in this is May's result from this May's local elections. Lib Dems won the vote share. Reform, though, with by no means a bad performance. They beat the Conservatives to second place. They were about 9 points behind the Lib Dems. But if you travel a bit further south into Bidford and Welford division, here is much different. And here, the Lib Dems and Reform are neck and neck. So look, Reform did do well in this part of Warwickshire in May as well. So perhaps not surprising to see that result so close and to see Reform take the victory in this case. Lastly, then, and it is the one bit of good news for the Conservatives tonight, they've gained a seat. They beat the Greens. Greens were defending Hale Ward in Trafford. The Conservatives increased their vote share by 9.7 points. The Greens lost 9.6 points. So it seems like a pretty straightforward transfer of votes there from one to the other. Majority of 8.4 points is decent for the Tories, 270 votes in it. 41% turnout, or 42% turnout really, is quite impressive for a local council by-election. Look, Hale is a traditionally Tory voting area. One could say it was pretty shambolic of them to have lost this ward in the first place. And this is one of those areas, I suppose, that's more that funny phenomenon of quite middle class, comfortable people voting for the Green Party and deserting the Tories. This happened in Suffolk as well. Waveney Valley, I think the constituency is exactly pretty much the same thing, I think, in terms of demographics. The Greens go very well with the students, so university towns and anywhere that has a high concentration of young voters, the Greens do well. And then just some areas with middle class people who vote Green for whatever reason. I don't necessarily know. I'd be interested to know actually genuinely how many people vote Green actually genuinely understand what they're voting for. And I'm getting a bit opinionated there perhaps, but I don't know if some people vote for the Greens because they think it's just a cushy environmentalist vote, when actually there's a lot more to the Green Party than that. Be interesting to know. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. So look, a good result for the Conservatives. They'll take any win they can get. But I think overall, this night was a really bad night for the Conservatives, as we saw them losing up to 30 points off their vote share in some places. So I don't think there's any sign of hope for the Tories. I don't think this is a sign of things to come. I don't think it's a sign of a revival or a turnaround. I still think they're finished, and I think the other results tonight kind of show that. They're not going to get wiped out entirely. I've never said that, but they are going to become somewhat irrelevant. Looking ahead to next week, then, for next week's by-election roundup, there's only 3 by-elections next week, actually. Only 3 to get our teeth into. What are we going to do with ourselves? So the first one, then, Hunstanton, Kings Lynn and West Norfolk Council. Now, this is, one would immediately say, is Reform territory these days, but it's an independent defending, and there are 2 independents standing. They got 35% of the vote last time. I always find independents kind of muddy the waters a little bit, because personalities and individual popularity sort of factors into it a lot more than just the party vote. So look, like I say, it would immediately, off the top of my head, very blithely again, like I say, I would say it is Reform territory. Would expect them to have a decent result here, but we'll have to wait and see. As you can see, quite a few more candidates on the ballot this time than there was previously. So potentially we might get one of these where the winner gets in with low 30s%, as we've seen a couple of times today as well. Next one, Barnoldswick Ward in Pendle. So the Liberal Democrats defending here. They got 58.3% of the vote last time. Now I can go to my own map and show you Barnoldswick Ward here in Pendle Council, and you can see Liberal Democrats, I've got it at 54%. We might be using a slightly different election over the past couple of years, but you can see the Liberal Democrats clearly out in front here in Pendle. It's only a 1-seat ward as well, which is quite interesting. Now remember, we just had that discussion about the tete-a-tete between the Lib Dems and Reform. Well, could this be an area where Reform maybe could challenge the Liberal Democrats? Well, potentially. If we look at, again, this is an electoral division result from May this year up in Lancashire County Council. As you can see, it was very much neck and neck, almost neck and neck, with the Lib Dems and Reform. Reform only 2% behind the Lib Dems up here. Now, of course, this is an electoral division, so you can see that yellow division up there is what we're looking at. And Barnoldswick is only really this northern portion of it, so perhaps up there is more Liberal Democrat inclined. Perhaps that's where their vote is stronger. But it'd be interesting to see, with Reform putting in a performance like that, earlier this year. Of course, reform didn't stand in this election last time, so that we don't have a comparative reform number in this specific ward to look at. So using the county council election there, it could be a very, very interesting result. We'll have to wait and see how well reform do up in Pendle. Lastly, for next week is Hetton Ward in Sunderland. Again, I haven't put too much research into this. As a Labour defence, this was actually up last year, and Reform scored 10.9%. Look, bear in mind, if this was in May, when for the full council election, bear in mind that this would have been before Reform took off. Before Nigel Farage came back, before a general election had been called, Reform probably polling around about 5 or 7% in the polls at this time. So Reform getting 10.9 last year, that could well rocket through. That they're doing very, very well up in the northeast. My immediate assumption would be that Reform could get a very, very good result here. Again, Independents did well here last time as well. They got about 30% of the vote, and there is another Independent standing again. May well be the same person. I don't know. I haven't looked into it. So, like I say, my immediate thought, Reform could do very, very well. The northeast, I think, could be a fertile ground for Reform next year, where there's a few northeastern councils up for election, and could well be here next week as well. So please do tune in next week to see what happens up there. Of course, we do have our preview series going on, looking ahead to the May elections in 2026. I haven't decided what region to look at next. We've done London or East London. We've done the Northwest. And we've looked at Wales. So we've still got to look at the West Midlands. We've got to look at the southeast of England, the northeast of England, Scotland, and 3/4 of London. So let me know what you'd like to see next, because I haven't really decided so far. Let me know what you think in the comments, and everything else as well. Please let me know all your comments and opinions on the rest of the stuff we've covered in the video today. Please do let me know. Like I say, I find your comments genuinely very useful and value adding. I really genuinely appreciate hearing your insights and your perspectives, because it sort of helps me when I talk about things in the future. So with that, I'll say thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.